This week, the first episode of Marvel's Moon Knight released. And if you haven't watched it, go and watch it because this review is going to include spoilers. Just before I get onto the review for Moon Knight, I do want to quickly mention the previous Marvel shows. And to me personally, I found them very lackluster. They never really stood out and they haven't really done anything engaging or really used being a TV show to their advantage. They very much just feel like films with a lot of filler. And it came out to very uninteresting experiences with pretty much all of them. There's some aspects of a few I liked, like Loki, I quite liked, and WandaVision started off strong but sort of went off the rails. So yeah, going into this, I didn't really know what to think because the previous shows hadn't been the best, and my personal knowledge of the Moon Knight character is pretty limited. I had heard of him before this show was announced, but I only sort of knew the basics, with him having the multiple personalities and stuff like that. Very minimal stuff I knew. So I was intrigued by the show because I could see potential in storytelling with that, with what I'd already known. And I have to say, I'm really glad so far. This is already the most engaging Marvel show. I think it's done the best job, especially with just its first episode, at getting me engaged with the story and characters. And a lot of that's down to Oscar Isaac, who's portraying the main character of Moon Knight, and he's somewhat in a dual role because you see him as Stephen Grant and also Mark Spector, who you don't really see that side of him much in this one. You see more the Stephen Grant, and it's honestly crazy, like his British accent. I think that's one of the things that I didn't expect. He does it really good. It's completely flawless. And taking on a dual role, I think, is always a task for actors, and he seems to do it quite well. It's not a lot in this film, and it only sort of comes towards more the second half of the show, I'd say, where you start to see him play the multiple personalities. But I have to say, he does a really good job at differentiating between the two people, even though they're both him. And speaking of the dual role, the cinematography really helps complement it. Like, you'll notice a lot throughout the first episode, it uses a lot of reflections and stuff like that, which is nothing new when showing sort of a split personality, but the camera work was very like top notch and professional. Like, there's a bit towards the end where it's moving like along with the character and it's sort of tracking the different side of him in the mirror as well. And it's little stuff like that. Nothing new, but it's always nice to see stuff like that. I've always found that really interesting. And it's a great way to portray, two personalities within the same body. And with that sort of split personality, I love how creative the fight scenes have been so far, which is you don't really see them. I know to some people they'd be like, "What are you on about?" But we're gonna see fight scenes later on, and the way this did it, where we're sort of seeing it from Stephen Grant's perspective, where he just sort of blacks out and then everything sort of happened, I thought was a great way of helping us to be put in the character's shoes, and it really hints towards the build-up of the sort of reveal at the end, which I thought was great as well. But yeah, such a creative way to show the split personality there, much more than the reflections, which I do like. But this sort of the fight scenes where he's blacking out and it's just skipping to sort of the end, it's something very unique and something I haven't really seen before. And with the blacking out, that's in a lot of aspects of the story. And just like the fight scenes, the story's told in a bit of a confusing way and, not the typical linear sense because huge gaps are sort of jumped and, he does black out like in his real life and he misses events and stuff. So when he's over in Germany or wherever he is, I somewhat knew what was going on because I had the previous knowledge of him being that split character or whatever. But I love that. It really helped you get in the character's shoes again because you were sort of confused like him. And it did a great way of just like cutting out travel time as well. A lot of films and shows, traveling is often a really odd thing to cut out. And this did a really good job where you just jump in from point to point and it really helped the pace of the first episode. And it felt like you got a lot of story and development and you really got to understand the characters. So it was confusing, but in a good way. We've also got Ethan Hawke in this show as well, and he's like the main villain. And you don't see much of him in this thing. When you're introduced to him, it looks like he's doing some sort of YouTube challenge, like putting glass in his shoes and walking around. But his whole sort of goal, I guess, as the villain, is somewhat similar to like Minority Report, where he's getting rid of bad people before they've actually done something bad in some cases. And that's an understandable goal and something where, he's not just like playing evil or whatever. But like I said, sort of Minority Report's done that before and it instantly made me think of that, which, ain't the best in terms of originality, but I think how they present it in the next few episodes you know, that could change my interest in it, and hopefully that makes it a bit more interesting. The show also has a lot of like horror elements as well. There's a lot of scenes that are built up on tension, but also just the aesthetics of the show like really link into the horror thing. Like there's a part where you're seeing this god, I'm guessing, and you know that's very horror-esque, you know what I mean? And same with the monster at the end. And speaking with sort of the monsters, this links into the next thing I want to talk about, which is the Egyptian feel. You know, the show's definitely going for that Egyptian aesthetic, you know what I mean? And I really like that, especially when it's delving into the mythology. We've had Marvel obviously go into Norse mythology before, and you know, I always like it when stuff gets into mythology and interprets it in its different way. Like down to even the music, it's very ancient Egypt feeling. And it's subtle stuff like that, which I think is going to help craft the world almost of this show. And with the Egyptian aesthetics, that leads into the final thing I want to talk about, which is Moon Knight's reveal at the end. And I love this sequence. I think it was great how, you know, the monster was chasing him and then it somewhat reverted and you don't really see what happens. And then that's trying to get away, the monster. And you just see sort of what a beast Moon Knight is. And, you know, the outfit's really interesting as well, how it's kind of like a mummy again with the Egyptian thing. And I thought it was such a great reveal, and it was a very brutal reveal, and I hope that correlates to the rest of the show. I hope this is a much more mature show than what we've had with the previous Marvel things, which were still very family friendly. Hope this is a much darker story, you know what I mean? Because to me, that's what the show should be. They should be experimenting with stuff, you know, that maybe wouldn't earn the most money at the box office if it was shown on the big screen. And hopefully Moon Knight is this. So yeah, I have to say the first episode has got me really intrigued and I can't wait for more. So yeah, that's pretty much it. See ya.
I'm going to, okay? Uh-oh, Will Smith just smacked the shit out. Uh-oh.
Oh, that's hot.